In Chapter 1, Violet wakes in Arisha, shocked to find her brother Brennan alive. She learns he saved her from a poisoned wound. Arisha, thought destroyed, is secretly being rebuilt as a stronghold for a rebellion against the Venin. Brennan, now a lieutenant colonel under the name Izere, leads part of this revolution. Violet overhears an assembly meeting, debating whether she and other cadets should return to Basgiath or stay to fight. Despite distrust from some members, Xaden and Brennan defend her. Violet confronts the assembly, asserting her loyalty, and prepares to confront Brennan with long-held questions. In Chapter 2, Violet confronts Brennan about faking his death for 6 years. He explains he stayed hidden to fight against the Venin, who are real and advancing toward Navarre. Violet learns Wyvern are created by Venin, and their numbers are growing rapidly. The revolution lacks resources, including a luminary to forge weapons. Brennan believes Navarre's wards might not hold, putting everyone at risk. Violet insists they return to Basgiath to protect other cadets despite the danger. And Darna has grown significantly, losing her ability to stop time. The group prepares to return in time for graduation, following Xaden's plan. In Chapter 3, Violet and her group secretly return to Basgiath before sunrise, aiming to avoid detection. Tairn drops Darna off at the Vale to protect her and other hatchlings. Violet and Xaden discuss trust, with Violet demanding full honesty going forward. The group splits up to execute their plan, and Violet retrieves Liam's letters, entrusting them to Rhiannon. As they prepare for graduation, Violet struggles to maintain her mental shields to block Dane's potential memory reading. Just as the death roll is read, naming Xaden and Garrick, the group steps into the courtyard, revealing they are alive, escalating tensions. In Chapter 4, Violet and her group return to Basgiath, interrupting graduation as their names are read from the death roll. Xaden boldly confronts Colonel Atos, accusing him of sending them into danger during war games. Violet supports Xaden's story, convincing her mother, General Sorengal, of its truth. Atos is reprimanded, and the cadets are ordered back into formation. Tensions rise between Violet and Dain, while Xaden asserts their relationship publicly. Graduation proceeds, with Xaden receiving his orders as a lieutenant, leaving Violet to grapple with his imminent departure and her new status as a second-year cadet. In Chapter 5, Violet and her friends celebrate becoming second years, sharing drinks and reflecting on their experiences. Imogen acknowledges Violet's role in saving their group, and they toast to Liam's memory. Xaden prepares to leave for the Southern Wing, revealing he'll only return every 2 weeks, which strains the bond between their dragons Tairn and Skyle. Colonel Atos introduces Major Varish as the new vice-commandant, hinting at stricter control over the quadrant. Violet and Xaden receive official orders limiting their time together, and Atos threatens them, implying their secrets will die with them. In Chapter 6, Colonel Atos threatens Violet and her sister Mira, implying deadly consequences if Violet reveals the truth about Resin. Furious, Violet loses control of her lightning power, but Xaden calms her. They discuss their forced separation. Xaden is stationed at Samara in the Southern Wing, and their dragons, Tairn and Skyle, will struggle with the distance. Xaden warns Violet to trust only those from Resin and avoid involvement in rebellion activities for her safety. After an emotionally charged goodbye, Violet learns Rhiannon is their new squad leader, while Atos becomes their wingleader, setting a tense tone for the year ahead. In Chapter 7, Violet begins her second year at Basgiath, attending Orientation for Rider Survival Course, RSC, which focuses on surviving behind enemy lines and withstanding interrogation. The course is secretive, and failing could mean expulsion or worse. Fewer dragons are bonding with riders, raising concerns about the Empyrean stance on the Venin threat. Violet, feeling isolated and unable to confide in friends due to Atos' threats, seeks answers in the archives. She reconnects with her scribe friend Jacinia, lying to gain access to historical texts, hoping to uncover a way to protect Erecha without relying solely on weapons. In Chapter 8, Violet oversees Conscription Day, observing new candidates, including King Tari's son Arik and Sloane Mary, Liam's sister, who blames Violet for his death. Despite Sloane's protests, Dain reassigns her to Violet's squad. During the ceremony, Major Varish's dragon Solace incinerates fleeing cadets, killing members of Third Squad and leaving Violet and her friends shaken. Tairn intervenes, threatening Solace and asserting his protection over Violet. This escalates tensions with Varish, who now views Violet as an enemy. The chapter highlights new alliances, growing animosities, and the ever-present danger within Basgiath. In Chapter 9, Violet struggles with nightmares from Resin and starts running with Imogen to improve her endurance, fearing she won't be fast enough in future battles. At Battle Brief, Violet learns about Griffin attacks on Sipina and Athabine, suspecting Venin involvement. She tries to join the rebellion efforts, but Bodhi refuses. During squad assessments, Sloane challenges Violet, but Professor Emiterio denies the match. As Sloane faces Eric, a bullish first year from Second Wing approaches and suddenly snaps Nadine's neck, leaving Violet and her squad in shock. In Chapter 10, Violet is attacked by a first-year cadet who mistakes Nadine for her, killing Nadine instantly. Violet kills the attacker after a brutal fight, suspecting Colonel Eidos orchestrated the assassination attempt. Struggling with guilt and grief, Violet pushes through her injuries to finish assessments, observing Sloane's poor combat skills despite being Liam's sister. Later, Xaden visits her, expressing regret for not arriving sooner. He confirms Eidos' involvement and warns Violet to stay vigilant. Before leaving for Samara, Xaden gives Violet a letter promising a deeper connection despite their limited time together. In Chapter 11, Violet continues training with Imogen while secretly longing for Xaden, whose letter reveals personal details but no revolutionary secrets. Jacinia, a scribe, seeks Violet's help translating a book in Old Lucerish, unknowingly exposing a writer to punishment after recording his book request. Later, Rhiannon delivers a redacted letter from Mira suggesting someone is censoring Violet's mail. Varish confronts Violet, ordering her to fly with Andarna, hinting at knowledge about her father's Feathertail research. Before leaving for Samara, Bodhi reveals assassination attempts against their group. Violet departs with Tairn, carrying secret supplies to aid the rebellion. In Chapter 12, Violet arrives at the remote Samara outpost, where Xaden is stationed, surrounded by treacherous terrain near the Paromial border. After locating Xaden's room, she discovers he's underground, fighting another rider for a weekend pass. Violet watches as Xaden wins, and they reunite with a passionate kiss, though Xaden refuses to rekindle their physical relationship without emotional trust. Later, Xaden reveals that daggers imbued with a special alloy are used to boost the wards and kill Venin. Their conversation deepens Violet's understanding of the rebellion's strategies and the significance of her own powers. In Chapter 13, Violet returns to Basgiath, where Major Varish punishes her for Andarna's absence by forcing her to summon excessive lightning strikes, pushing her to the brink of burnout. After collapsing, Tairn flies her to the river to cool her overheated body. Her friends help her recover, but the threat of Varish's next punishment looms. Later, Violet and Imogen observe Sloane struggling in sparring, prompting Violet to consider intervening. While heading to class with friends, Violet is ambushed, a bag thrown over her head, and she's rendered unconscious, leaving her fate uncertain. In Chapter 14, Violet and her friends awaken in a forest, drugged and disoriented, cut off from their dragons and signets. They're thrust into a joint land navigation exercise with infantry cadets, healers, and a scribe, tasked with finding and securing an extraction point. Tension rises between the riders and infantry, but cooperation becomes vital when Bade, an orange dragon, attacks. A cadet panics and runs, triggering Bida to unleash a deadly blast that kills Tomas. The chapter ends with Rhiannon reminding the group of the fatal consequences of fear and disobedience in the face of dragons. In Chapter 15, Violet and her group fail the land navigation exercise after realizing too late that their maps didn't match. They struggle with exhaustion, hunger, and frustration, narrowly avoiding another dragon encounter. Tomas's death weighs heavily on them. Rhiannon confronts Violet about her increasing distance from friends, but Violet remains guarded. The next morning, professors arrive, disappointed with their failure, and lift the suppression on their bonds and signets. The experience leaves the riders feeling violated, knowing leadership can now suppress their powers at will. Tensions rise as Violet acknowledges the growing strain on her friendships and mounting suspicions. In Chapter 16, Violet returns to the archives to research the wards. Jacinia, suspecting the archives are incomplete, offers to help Violet find classified texts about how the First Six built the wards. Meanwhile, Violet helps Sloane win a challenge by secretly drugging her opponent, fulfilling a promise to protect Liam's sister. She also leverages Liam's letters to ensure Sloane continues training. Jacinia provides a second book, The Sacrifice of Dragonkind, but it offers little useful information. As Violet prepares to visit Xaden, Varish ominously escorts her, hinting at scrutiny over her squad's missing maneuvers and Andarna's absence. In Chapter 17, Violet suspects leadership is keeping her and Xaden apart as punishment for not producing Andarna. Imogen advises Violet to reconnect with her friends. During Battle Brief, Rhiannon shows Violet a suspicious village notice warning against strangers, which Markham uses to spread false propaganda about Paromial. Violet struggles to contain her power, realizing the school may be hiding truths about border conflicts and dragons. Desperate for answers, she rushes to the archives and convinces Jacinia to help her find more books about the wards. Jacinia warns Violet to be cautious, agreeing to deliver more texts secretly. In Chapter 18, Xaden arrives unexpectedly at Violet's room, finding her buried in research on the First Six and the wards. Their conversation quickly turns tense when he discovers her secret investigation, realizing Brennan told her about Aricha's wardstone. Despite their argument over trust and secrecy, Violet insists on continuing her research to protect Aricha. Xaden accompanies her to meet Jacinia, the scribe aiding Violet. Jacinia remains discreet, providing more books. The couple's unresolved tension culminates in another fight, with Xaden leaving abruptly. Violet wakes to find him gone, fearing their last words might have been in anger. In Chapter 19, during flight maneuvers, Vice Commandant Varish charges Violet with dereliction of duty for Andarna's absence, threatening punishment. Tairn intervenes, attacking Varish's Dragon Solace and forcing Varish to apologize publicly. This escalates tensions between Violet and Varish. Later, Violet struggles with guilt over keeping secrets from Rhiannon. They argue about the harsh realities of war, Violet's trauma, and the emotional distance between them. Their confrontation is interrupted by Varish, who searches Violet but finds nothing. Violet acknowledges the danger they all face and begins to mend her strained friendship with Rhiannon, hinting at deeper truths to come. In Chapter 20, Violet arrives at Samara for flight training, grappling with tension from her last encounter with Xaden. Upon landing, they share a public kiss to maintain appearances, but the passion reveals unresolved feelings. Mira, now stationed at Samara, notices Violet's affection for Xaden, raising concerns. Later, Violet trains with Mira, subtly probing her about ward mechanics and Paramish border attacks. Mira dismisses Violet's hints about Wyvern. That night, Xaden and Violet reconcile, sharing secrets about the wards, alloy composition, and their mutual trust issues. Their bond deepens, but unspoken love lingers between them. In Chapter 21, Violet injures her shoulder during a failed rolling dismount, leaving her in a sling for 4 weeks. In history class, the professor announces an attack on the Eastern Wing, resulting in the death of Mason Sanborn, a rider who survived Resson. Suspicious of an assassination, Violet grows uneasy. During combat training, Dane challenges her, attempting to read her memories, but she keeps her shields up. He reveals Violet's mother carved Xaden's back scars, deepening Violet's distrust. Rhiannon starts piecing together Violet's secrets, while Arik hints he knows more about the rebellion and why he's at Basgiath. In Chapter 22, Violet wakes from a nightmare involving a Venin who threatens her life. Later, Xaden takes her to Basgiath's forge, ready to share rebellion secrets, but they're intercepted by Major Varish and Professor Grady. Varish initiates interrogation training, detaining Violet, Rhiannon, Sawyer, and Ridoc. Xaden resists, but Violet convinces him to stand down to avoid losing their leave. Before being taken, Violet discreetly instructs Xaden to return a book to the archives, hinting at her continued investigation into the wards. As she's led away, Xaden reminds her she's unbreakable, reinforcing their bond despite the looming danger. In Chapter 23, Violet and her squad are taken for interrogation training, hidden beneath the quadrant. Professor Grady explains the exercise where they must protect classified information and personal secrets. The squad quickly realizes their drinks were drugged to sever dragon connections, but they avoid consuming them. When the scenario begins, Violet is shackled and beaten to force the squad to reveal their secrets. Despite escalating torture, they hold strong. Hours later, Vice Commandant Varish intervenes to speed up the process, introducing wingleader Dain Atos, Violet's former friend with a mind-reading signet, posing a new threat to their secrets. In Chapter 24, Dane is brought in to use his memory-reading signet on Violet but refuses, citing regulations about her injuries. Vice Commandant Varish retaliates by brutally dislocating Violet's shoulder, causing her to pass out. She wakes healed by Nolan, who warns her varish plans to continue torturing her and subtly hints at escape. With Rhiannon, Riddoch, and Sawyer, Violet orchestrates their breakout using Sawyer's magic and, unexpectedly, one of her daggers, which unlocks the final door. As they flee, the danger of Varish's relentless pursuit and the stakes of Violet's secrets intensify. In Chapter 25, Violet and her squad escape the interrogation chamber, earning a silver patch symbolizing their success. In the days following, Dain avoids Violet, and tensions rise after they learn 2 cadets died during interrogation assessments. During Battle Brief, leaflets reveal that Zolia, a Poramish city, fell to dragonfire, killing 10,000 civilians. The news causes chaos, but Markham dismisses it as propaganda. The session shifts when Colonel Nolan introduces Jack Barlow, who Violet believes she killed. His return shocks Violet, confirming he's a threat and likely to try killing her again. In Chapter 26, Violet is confronted by Jack Barlow, who is alive despite her previous belief that she killed him. She struggles to focus on the briefing, where Professor Devra announces an unprecedented attack on the Samara outpost with 1 rider severely wounded. Violet's anxiety surges as she fears for Xaden's safety. Unable to remain in the briefing room, she rushes out, determined to find out if Xaden is alive. Bodhi helps her prepare for flight, handing her a jacket before she leaves for the courtyard, where Tairn is waiting, understanding her urgency. In Chapter 27, Violet arrives at Samara, frantic to find out about Xaden's condition after hearing he was wounded. She rushes through the outpost, relieved to find Mira unharmed, but still desperate to see Xaden. When Violet finds him sparring with Garrick, it turns out Xaden isn't seriously injured, though his scar indicates a close call. Their intense emotional connection erupts, leading to a passionate encounter in the gym. Despite their physical connection, Violet struggles with her emotions, questioning their future. Xaden assures her he won't give up on her, and they prepare to leave together. In Chapter 28, Violet and Xaden fly out beyond the wards for a rendezvous with Serena and her Griffin squad. Tensions rise as Xaden insists on protecting the safety of the wards and their supply of weapons, prioritizing the defense of Basgiath over helping Serena's forces. As the conversation becomes increasingly hostile, Violet notices the younger Griffin, Katrina, displaying a deep connection with Xaden, causing jealousy and concern. Xaden remains resolute in his commitment to the Forge and the wards. The chapter ends with Violet reflecting on the emotional dynamics between Xaden, Katrina, and herself, questioning the future of their relationship. In Chapter 29, Violet and Xaden continue to navigate their complicated relationship, with Violet grappling with jealousy and insecurity over Katrina, Xaden's ex. They discuss the Luminary and its importance, with Xaden revealing that Viscount Treacherous wants Violet to wield it, but Xaden refuses to trust him. Upon returning to Basgiath, Violet faces potential punishment for leaving without leave, but avoids serious repercussions thanks to Professor Kaori's intervention. She finally reveals to her squad that the dagger is for killing Venin and confesses much of her recent actions, including the assassination attempts, supply missions, and secrets involving the dragons. In Chapter 30, Violet reveals almost everything to her squad, including the assassination attempts, daggers, and the theory about Navarre luring the Venin. Her friends are shocked but supportive, deciding to focus on researching wards to prepare for the impending threat. The squad continues their studies, while Violet deals with her growing fears and the pressure of keeping secrets. During a watch, Violet and Aya are attacked by assassins. After a brutal fight, Aya is killed, and Violet is thrown from the tower, but manages to cling to the edge. Someone saves her at the last moment, and her life is spared. In Chapter 31, Violet is saved by Jack Barlow after being thrown from a tower by an assassin. Despite their history, Jack pulls her to safety, and they share a brief moment of understanding. Violet processes Aya's death and the growing threat from Eidos. Riddoch arrives, worried about Violet's condition, and she explains what happened. Riddoch shares the bad news that Jacinia found the royal vault but needs someone from King Tari's bloodline to access it. Violet resolves to use their connection to the prince, planning to protect what Aya fought for, even in the face of overwhelming danger. In Chapter 32, Violet and her team prepare to break into the archives to retrieve important journals on ward building. Xaden initially protests, but agrees to join once Violet insists. They are joined by Jacinia, who leads them through the archives, while Arik reluctantly participates due to his animosity with Xaden. Jacinia reveals a hidden stairwell leading to deeper, restricted parts of the archives. Tensions rise as they race against time, with Xaden warning them about the potential consequences if they are caught. The team proceeds cautiously, aware that they have less than an hour to complete their mission. In Chapter 33, Violet and her team infiltrate the archives to retrieve two critical journals. Xaden and Imogen handle guards, while Violet and Arik search through hundreds of tomes, facing immense magical wards. Arik suffers injury from the wards, but retrieves the books. With only minutes left, the team races against the clock to escape, narrowly avoiding capture as the door closes. Xaden risks himself to ensure Violet and the team make it out safely even as time runs out. The team barely escapes with the books, leaving a tense, dangerous aftermath as they flee. In Chapter 34, Xaden and Arik barely escape the archive's closing door, retrieving the crucial journals. The group sticks to their plan, handing the journals to Violet and Xaden, who part ways to keep them safe. Violet reads Warwick's journal, confirming how the first six set the wards. After Xaden leaves, Nolan approaches Violet, offering a drink. She quickly realizes the lemonade is tainted. As her connections blur, Varish arrives, revealing that she's been caught. In Chapter 35, Violet wakes up in a prison cell, realizing she's been caught after being drugged by Nolan. She's interrogated by Varish and Nolan about the stolen journal, but refuses to reveal her allies or plans. Dain is brought in to help extract information, but Violet resists, using her mental shields to protect her secrets. During the interrogation, Dain realizes the severity of the situation, but Violet is tortured as a means to lure Xaden. Just as Dain prepares to kill Violet, he turns on Varish, freeing Violet and helping her escape. In Chapter 36, Xaden and Violet confront Dain as tensions rise. Violet kills Varish, and Xaden helps her walk as they prepare to escape. Violet is struggling with her injuries and fears for the future. As they leave the prison, they encounter Violet's mother, who offers Violet the antidote to the serum. She reveals that Violet's survival was part of a deal with Riorson. After a brief confrontation, Xaden and Violet head toward Riorson House. Violet's brother, Brennan, confronts them, questioning what they've done. The chapter ends as the group prepares to flee, with dragons filling the sky. In Chapter 37, Violet wakes up in Xaden's room, safe and recovering from her previous injuries. As they prepare to face the chaos in Arisha, they are confronted by a council of riders who are upset over their decision to bring a large group of cadets. Tensions rise as the council questions Violet's actions and Xaden's responsibility for her. Despite the backlash, Xaden asserts his authority over the situation, declaring his loyalty to Violet and taking responsibility for her actions. Meanwhile, Violet feels a sense of relief when she hears Andarna's voice, signaling her dragon's return. In Chapter 38, Violet reunites with Andarna, who has awakened after a long dragon coma. However, Andarna struggles with her wing, which isn't fully functional due to rapid growth. Tairn explains that while Andarna will eventually fly, she will never bear a rider. Meanwhile, the cadets resume their training, and Violet continues translating Warwick's journal. Tensions rise as news of enemy movements and a possible attack by dark wielders emerge. Violet's sister Mira, leading a group of defectors, arrives at Arisha with Tairn and several other dragons. The reunion is emotional, though Brennan's return adds complexity to their situation. In Chapter 39, Brennan suffers an injury from Mira's punch, leading to tension between them. The group discusses their next steps, including the potential need for a luminary and the Wardstone's activation. Violet leads a group to the Wardstone, but the ritual to activate it fails, causing frustration. As Violet grapples with the failure, she decides to take action to secure weapons and alliances. She demands to meet with Viscount Treacherous, recognizing the need for strong defenses. Brennan and Tairn reluctantly follow, and Violet turns to her sister Mira for help, signaling her determination to protect her friends. In Chapter 40, Violet and her team journey to Cordon to negotiate for a luminary in exchange for weaponry. They face a tense encounter with griffins and their riders, including a truthsayer who tests their honesty. After making their intentions clear, they are allowed to meet with Viscount Treacherous. The atmosphere remains fraught, with tensions between Violet's group and the Flyers escalating, particularly when Mira threatens the Flyer leader. Upon meeting Treacherous, Violet faces a harsh confrontation with someone from her past, signaling a complicated and dangerous negotiation ahead. In Chapter 41, Violet, Xaden, and their group arrive at Viscount Treacherous's palace, where they are subjected to a tense, high-stakes dinner and demonstration. Treacherous insists on seeing Violet wield lightning before discussing the luminary deal. As Violet prepares to strike a target, the chest holding her target bursts open, revealing a man who is revealed to be a Venin. Xaden and Mira react quickly as the situation escalates. Violet faces the terrifying reality of her own emotional power, realizing her ability to control her signet may not be as developed as she hoped, setting the stage for dangerous consequences. In Chapter 42, Violet confronts a Venin in an arena, using her lightning to strike while facing life-threatening pressure. With Tairn's help, she manages to kill the Dark Wielder just as her siblings escape to safety. After the battle, Treacherous offers Violet and her team a deal. In exchange for the Luminary, they must train Griffin cadets to fight Wyvern and take them back to Aria. Despite the tension and personal stakes, Brennan agrees to the deal, demanding each cadet be armed. The chapter ends with Violet uncertain about the cost of their new arrangement and the looming dangers. In Chapter 43, Violet and the others begin a treacherous climb up the cliffs of Draelor, tasked with reaching the summit while navigating narrow paths and deadly traps. Tensions rise between flyers and riders as they struggle with the harsh conditions and altitude sickness. Violet, paired with Marin and Sloane, helps guide her team through obstacles, but the journey takes a dangerous turn when a boulder nearly crushes them. As they face a critical leap over a rope, Luella falters, pulling Violet and Visja toward the cliff's edge. In a desperate moment, Sibi the Griffin saves Visja, but Riddoch is gravely injured by arrows. Violet cries out for help as Brennan is the only one who can save him. In Chapter 44, Violet and her team face mounting tension as they deal with the aftermath of Luella's fall, which leads to the grief of Sibi the Griffin. Violet's shoulder is dislocated, but Dane assists her in getting it back in place. As the group continues, they are suddenly attacked by wyverns, which are created through Dark Wielder magic. Violet uses a risky tactic to kill the wyverns, drawing energy from their magic, and Tairn assists in distracting them. The team realizes that their actions have alerted the Dark Wielders, signaling that they will now be targeted. The danger escalates as they prepare for the coming conflict. In Chapter 45, Violet and her squad face the harsh reality of war as they attend morning formation, where they learn of fallen riders and flyers. The tension between riders and flyers continues, with Kat and her drift blaming Violet for Luella's death. Meanwhile, Professor Trissa teaches the group about runes, a powerful form of magic once banned, but now being revived. Trissa instructs them to temper their own magic into runes, beginning with a simple unlocking rune. Despite struggles, Violet manages to complete the rune by sunset. Tensions rise as they confront both their powers and their ongoing divisions. In Chapter 46, Violet continues to struggle with rune lessons, but makes progress in mastering them, with Xaden offering guidance. They discuss the history behind certain runes and their personal connections to them, particularly the protective rune given to Xaden by his parents. Tensions rise when Devra announces that the cadets will be merged with the flyers, forcing them to fight out their grievances. Rhiannon and Imogen win their matches, and Violet faces Kat in a sparring match. The fight is intense, but Violet recognizes Kat's fighting style as similar to Xaden's, signaling a deeper connection between them. In Chapter 47, Violet and Kat engage in an intense sparring match fueled by jealousy and rage. Kat taunts Violet about her relationship with Xaden, pushing Violet to the edge. During the fight, Violet nearly chokes Kat, but is stopped by Xaden's voice, breaking the anger spell. Xaden reveals Kat cheated by using mind work, causing Violet to nearly lose control. Xaden intervenes, taking Violet to the assembly chamber, where he demands the others leave before examining her injuries. Tension between Violet and Kat deepens, revealing their underlying motivations and Xaden's protective instincts toward Violet. In Chapter 48, Violet struggles with the emotional aftermath of her confrontation with Kat, who insulted her and Xaden's relationship. Xaden comforts Violet, assuring her that she is more than just a placeholder and that her insecurities are amplified by Kat's manipulation. They discuss their complex feelings and the pressure of their past, with Xaden emphasizing that Violet must take control of her emotions. He provides her with the protection of rune daggers to guard against Kat's influence. As they resolve their tension, they share a tender moment, and Xaden asks Violet to meet him in bed later. In Chapter 49, Violet and her squad are forced to integrate with Cat's drift, despite tensions and rivalry. Violet maintains control, offering Cat a patch and asserting their position as the Iron Squad. They face off with sarcastic remarks, but Violet keeps her composure, using her knowledge to turn the tables on Cat. Violet later meets with Tairn to work on imbuing a wardstone and to discuss the past. Dane apologizes for his role in the death of her friends and asks about her feelings for Xaden. Violet firmly declares her love for Xaden, asserting her commitment to him. In Chapter 50, Violet continues her training with Felix to gain better control over her power, learning how to manipulate energy more precisely. She struggles with limiting the flow of power, but Felix encourages her to find joy in it rather than fear it. Meanwhile, Xaden returns unexpectedly early, and tensions rise as news spreads about the loss of Pavis to the enemy. Nira Voldarin, a senior wingleader, has fallen, and the front lines are becoming increasingly unstable. Violet's squad is informed that the wing structure may change, signaling a new and dangerous phase in the war. In Chapter 51, Violet continues her intense work on translating Warwick's journal with Tairn, struggling to decode a critical passage about raising the wards. She realizes that the symbol for blood should be translated as breath, leading to the discovery that the 6 mentioned in the journal refers to dragons, not riders. This breakthrough makes Violet question whether she should proceed with raising the wards, as she's unsure of the ethical implications. She rushes to tell Rhiannon, revealing her discovery and her hesitation about acting on it. The chapter ends with Violet facing a difficult decision regarding the wards. In Chapter 52, Violet and her squad gather for a meeting at Rhiannon's house, where they discuss the critical situation with the wards and the implications for the flyers. Violet reveals her breakthrough on raising the wards, but warns that doing so will strip the flyers of their power. As tensions rise, the squad debates the decision, with Violet torn between doing what's right for their survival and the potential consequences. After a brief reunion with Xaden, Violet's focus returns to the mission, and she prepares for the upcoming flight, leaving the discussion on the wards unresolved for now. In Chapter 53, Violet's squad embarks on a mission to retrieve ruined boxes from a cave. As they struggle through the snow in tension with Cat, Violet receives a troubling warning from Andarna about the scent of other dragons nearby. Inside the cave, they find a chest with a dangerous unlocking rune, and Cat steps up to open it. However, their mission takes a dire turn when they encounter a full-grown dragon blocking their escape. The dragon's growls indicate imminent danger, and in a tragic moment, Visya is struck, seemingly killed. Violet calls for help as the threat intensifies. In Chapter 54, Violet and her squad face a deadly dragon Solace inside a cave. After a violent confrontation, Violet uses her power to fight back, injuring the dragon. With help from Andarna, they manage to create an opening for Cat and Sloane to escape, but Violet is left behind, severely injured. Sloane and Cat try to assist her, but the situation is dire. Violet then discovers that Sloane has manifested a siphon signet, and Solace is killed by Andarna. Back at Riorson House, Xaden confronts Violet about her actions, leading to a tense argument about her self-sacrifice. In Chapter 55, Violet confronts Xaden about the deal he made with her mother, which kept her alive and allowed him to fall in love with her. Xaden admits to keeping secrets, but insists he would have told her if she'd asked. The argument escalates as Violet reveals her deep fears of their relationship's foundation, questioning whether Xaden loves her for her or simply because of the deal. Violet challenges Xaden about his second signet, revealing her suspicions. Before they can resolve their issues, Xaden is interrupted by Brennan, informing them of an impending wyvern attack, prompting Violet to consider raising the wards. In Chapter 56, Violet and her team work to activate the wards just as a wyvern horde approaches. They successfully imbue the wardstone, which repels the wyvern with ease, confirming the wards are operational. However, tensions with Xaden continue, particularly surrounding his secret second signet, which Violet eventually uncovers. He is an Intrinsic, capable of reading intentions. As the group celebrates their victory, Violet and Xaden face unresolved emotional conflicts. Meanwhile, Serena reveals troubling news. General Melgren of Navarre has summoned Violet and Mira to a meeting, potentially signaling a dangerous shift in power dynamics. In Chapter 57, Violet and her team meet at Athabine for a tense encounter with General Melgren, who reveals that the Wyvern will attack Samara during the solstice and the wards protecting Navarre will fail if not maintained. Violet's mother hints at the declining power of the wards, urging Violet to act. After the meeting, Violet and Mira investigate a wyvern carcass, discovering that dark wielders may have imbued the creatures with magic. Violet unleashes lightning to kill the reanimated wyvern, but the looming danger of broken wards and hidden lies leaves her with more questions than answers. In Chapter 58, Violet confronts Xaden in the sparring gym after their week of silence. They discuss the Assembly's stance on Samara and Xaden's secrets. Violet demands transparency and establishes a rule for no more secrets, leading to a more open conversation, including about Xaden's estranged mother and his signet. Meanwhile, the tension grows within their squad as they prepare for the looming war. When they receive updated intelligence about the enemy's movements, Violet realizes Samara is a distraction, and the real target is Basgiath. She decides they must fight, risking everything to protect civilians and stand against Navarre's betrayal. In Chapter 59, Violet and her squad make a high-risk journey to Basgiath to defend the wards after suspecting that Samara is a distraction. Upon arrival, Violet and Xaden confront her mother, who dismisses their warnings. As they investigate, they discover a hidden chamber with a wardstone on fire and guarded by Bade, a dragon under Jack Barlow's control. After a fierce battle, Barlow kills Bade with a sword strike, causing the wardstone to collapse and the wards to fall. The chapter ends with the ward's protection lost, setting the stage for an imminent confrontation. In Chapter 60, Violet and Xaden face the aftermath of Jack's betrayal as he kills his own dragon and reveals his transformation into venom. The wardstone has been destroyed, leaving Navarre defenseless. Tension escalates as Violet and Xaden work with their squad to prepare for the incoming Venom army. They learn that Jack planted lures across the college, which led the Venom to them. With reinforcements delayed, they plan to hunt the lures while preparing for battle. Violet's brother Brennan arrives to fight alongside them, and they secure permission to guard the wardstone chamber as the battle approaches. In Chapter 61, Violet and her squad prepare for the impending battle with a massive wyvern horde. They are stationed on a ridgeline, ready to defend Basgiath as the first wave of wyvern approaches. Tensions rise as Violet and Tairn face their enemies, with their squad coordinating attacks against the wyvern and their riders. Violet struggles with fatigue, but continues to fight relentlessly, using her powers to strike down multiple targets. As the battle intensifies, Tairn and Violet confront a dark wielder, and Violet is trapped, only to be saved by Rhiannon. The stakes grow higher as the squad battles to protect the wardstone and hold their ground. In Chapter 62, Violet struggles to save her friend Sawyer, who is critically injured by a wyvern. As the battle intensifies, Violet risks her life to jump from Tairn's back onto a wyvern to save Sawyer while the squad fights fiercely. Sawyer is severely wounded, and Violet works to stabilize him. Marin and Bragan arrive to help transport him to the healers. Meanwhile, a dark wielder named Wind threatens Violet, but she defeats her using her lightning powers. Just as she is immobilized by another dark wielder, a massive dragon-like creature appears, signaling new threats to come. In Chapter 63, Andarna saves Violet by defeating a dark wielder, and the squad faces mounting pressure as the enemy prepares for a final assault. Violet learns from Jacinia that a discrepancy in Lyra's journal suggests the wardstone might be reactivated with the right power. Xaden and Violet argue with General Melgren about the Vale's defense strategy, pushing to use the wardstone as a last line of defense. Despite Melgren's refusal, Xaden stands firm, forcing him to listen to Violet's plan. As tensions rise, the Wyvern Horde's leader emerges, and Xaden declares that they are waiting for him. In Chapter 64, Violet and Xaden face the looming threat of the enemy's forces, including the Sage, a dark wielder from Resson. As Violet races to raise the wards at Basgiath, she is forced to choose between protecting the wardstone or her home. With Xaden's encouragement, she focuses on the stone, and the presence of Andarna, a mysterious dragon, reveals a hidden truth about her unique origins. As Violet channels immense power into the stone, her mother sacrifices herself to save them. The wardstone activates, but at the cost of Violet's mother's life, leaving Violet devastated. In Chapter 65, Violet struggles with the loss of her mother, who sacrificed herself to raise the wardstone and save her friends. While navigating the aftermath of the battle, Violet reunites with Xaden, who reveals that he killed the Sage. They discuss their grief and the future, with Xaden expressing guilt for Violet's loss, despite his father's involvement in her mother's death. As Violet tries to process the emotional and physical toll of the battle, Xaden warns her about a deeper fear related to him, hinting at a dangerous side of himself that even he is struggling with. In Chapter 66, Xaden confronts the Sage in a brutal showdown, pushing himself to the brink of burnout as he fights to keep Violet safe. Despite his immense effort and power, he is ultimately outmatched and faces the looming threat of the Sage targeting Violet directly. The battle abruptly ends as Xaden awakens from a nightmare, shaken by the lingering effects of the fight. Driven by his fear of becoming corrupted, Xaden seeks answers from Jack Barlow. Jack's chilling response confirms that there is no way to undo the hunger for power once it has been taken, leaving Xaden to wrestle with the implications of his growing darkness.